All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have Chloe Mandell and George Mihaly here to talk with us about how to run virtual events, a few best practices and tips and tricks for the new world of virtual engagement. So as always, on the agenda, we'll go through a quick Zoom tutorial, some ground rules, and then Chloe and George will take over and give their presentations. And then there will be time at the end for Q&A. So while they're talking, make sure to get your questions ready. So as always, getting the most out of today's call, this section, since it's again a call about virtual events, this section is always important to educate your audience on how to be a virtual audience, the ways that you want them to engage with you, and letting them know what tools and features of the platform you're using that you want them to use. And so for us, that's always the Q&A, the chat, and the raise hand features, which are located in the middle of your Zoom tool. Make sure to put your questions in the Q&A box, which helps us just organize them. You can also upvote each other's questions if somebody else has the same question as you, and then that rises them up to the top of the list. For everything else, you can throw that into the chat. Make sure when you do that, you use the drop-down to select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see what you're saying and not just the four of us here on the panel. And then finally, there will be time, like I said, for Q&A at the end. So if you'd like to jump into the conversation, ask a question verbally, make comments in real time, go ahead and use the raise hand feature. I will unmute you and you can take it away. And again, we are trying something a little bit new. We tried this last week and we're trying it again this week. So we're using the hashtag #LearnedAtCWA for everyone to share your top takeaways on social, hopefully get a little conversation going there. The ground rules, as always, are just to be polite and respectful of each other and the speakers. No personal political commentary. If you do get a chance to raise your hand and speak live, please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. And if there are any issues, we do have the ability to remove abusive participants. So we are really excited to have Chloe Mandell with us again this week. Chloe is the founder and CEO of Mandell Experiences, a full-service event company based in Portland, Oregon. She got her start in the climbing industry as a front desk employee at the Circuit Bouldering Gym in 2009. She served as the marketing and events manager there for 7 years and then started her own company, Mandell Experiences, in 2015. Since then, she has helped produce such comps as Cycleblock Master Series, Portland Boulder Rally, and The Hang during Outdoor Retailer, and has consulted for a dozen others, including Woman Up, Come and Send It Fest, Bend Summer Comp, Tri-State Bouldering Series, and Dominion River Rock, just to name a few. Chloe leans on her event experience outside of the climbing industry to support climbing events with event industry best practices and standards. Most notably, Chloe was the lead coordinator at X Games and a hospitality manager at the Rio Olympics. She is also the founder of compcalendar.com, a place to find when and where climbing comps are happening. So thank you so much for, excuse me, for joining us again this week, Chloe.
Hey, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, CWA, for having me. I'm joined by George Mihaly. We'll hear from him after my presentation. And just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to join us for how to run a virtual event. This is kind of new, a 2-part series. Last week, definitely check out the recording. We talked a lot about kind of what's possible within virtual events, kind of like why even virtual events can support your community and be helpful to your business. But today we're going to be really focusing on the how. So I'll jump right into it. You'll notice a few differences too. It's like the hardest thing in the world to rewatch yourself present, but taking note, I want to have a little bit more screen time, right? Create some more good feelings between, you know, the presenter, right? Always think of yourself on camera as someone that hopefully is in the room with someone else. So my goals for today is to kind of give you a step-by-step plan for before, during, and after your virtual event. So breaking it up into those 3 components, and hopefully kind of put some nice stories and experiences of my own to help demonstrate what I'll be sharing, and really give you guys some ideas, inspiration to really think like, how can you take the events or maybe the classes you're doing and make them 10% better? No need, everything should be approachable. No need to think like, oh, I need to be a master event planner. Really just take what you're already doing and think of some elements from this presentation that maybe can support the events you're already putting on or can put on. So I'll start off with pre-event. So in my last presentation, definitely check it out. I talked about strategy, really understanding why you're doing the event. I'm gonna jump straight into the topic of access, because really kind of being mindful of the times when you're talking is important. And access is such a huge issue when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and taking that into consideration when building out your events. So I just want to note that access is a little different than accessibility. Access means how to get the content that you're producing. Accessibility is how the content is then being consumed. So I'll focus on accessibility a little bit later, but with access, the first question I'm sure you're going to ask is which platform to use, right? So this is a big question on people's minds. Laura, if you want to put up that poll real quick, on which platforms, everyone, if you could take a moment to please go ahead and pick which platforms you have used. Here we go. So which platforms have you hosted a virtual class or event on? We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Zoom, Google Hangouts. I'm sure there's many other. There's actually over 100 different virtual event platforms. A lot of them people don't know about. So really, George will focus a lot on the topic of platforms. So I don't want to go in too deep, but making sure you're on a platform that people already know can help. So let's wrap this poll up in just a moment. How are we doing, Laura?
Yeah, we're doing great. We actually have a few stragglers coming in with their responses. Looks like it's slowing down now, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'm going to share the results.
Perfect. So one thing we noticed even in kind of watching the recording from last week is that this poll doesn't show up in the recording. So I'm going to read this out. So Facebook, we had about 35%, Instagram, 45%, YouTube, 20%, Zoom, 80%. I imagine that's a lot of those classes and youth programs. Google Hangouts, 10%. Other 30%. So go ahead and throw in the chat to help one another with what are those other platforms you're using that maybe you can inspire others to use. So super interesting. Thank you for taking that poll. That's just one way to engage with your audience. Also a little note with polls, you want to keep them short and just kind of hopefully once you see, just like with popcorn, once it stops to like pop as quickly, then kind of close your poll as quickly as possible. And so going into access, right? We're talking about platform, picking a day, time, and duration. So even this call right now, we have people from Canada, South Africa, all across the United States, Brooklyn, Colorado, Portland, joining in. And so in your, when you select a date and time, and even an event duration, really accommodating your audience. If you're trying for a national reach or even an international reach, kind of really picking the best time for that will be helpful. Also taking into account, maybe people are already kind of back at work. And so as you will know in scheduling your classes, right, making sure to accommodate that to make it as accessible as possible, like we're talking about. And if you are trying to reach a national audience, publicize that time zone, which time zone you're talking about in your event promotion, and maybe you might even include a couple time zones because everyone's thinking from their perspective. So if I see something, I'm based in Portland, Oregon, if I see something from Pacific Standard Time, I'm a lot more able to understand when it's going to be. And then as far as access, pick a way to sign up. So I'm going to give a personal anecdote. Right when COVID hit and gyms had to close, I got several calls from friends that knew I'd been training on hangboards. And they were asking me, hey, like I've seen you train on the hangboard, how can I do it? And because I kept getting so many questions about it, I was like, okay, well maybe I'll just put together a quick virtual tutorial. So what I did was posted in the Climb PDX Facebook group. So maybe in your local area, there's a way for climbers kind of to engage either with your business or just as a whole community. So I posted like, hey, who's interested in learning about hangboarding? I got nearly 50 responses. So instead of kind of just trying to tackle, you know, promoting to every single person kind of when it's going to be, or making sure they can sign up, or making sure they can log on, I created a registration through GoToWebinar, but then I rehearsed on GoToWebinar and didn't like it as much as Zoom. So I used GoToWebinar's sign up page. Also, the biggest reason for that too is I could ask what's called a checkout question. So registration, so you could just put your event out there that it's going to be at this time and just hope that people show, and that's great. One benefit of offering registration is that you can mine some data. For example, with the Portland Boulder Rally, I always ask, you know, how many years have you been competing? Are you a member of the gym, right? And that's really interesting to see and start to get an understanding of the demographic joining. So just some perks to registration, let alone maybe you can charge something on a sliding scale. Everyone has a little different opinion on that, of what to charge. You are creating value for people's time, but I love Brad Wertz presented last week on doing a virtual tip jar, just, you know, throwing up your Venmo account. So that's a piece around access. I also want to dive into marketing because I know that came up as a question and always important to think about in your pre-production. So 3 things with marketing, and it could be its own webinar, but make it easy, make it frequent, and lean on your micro influencers. I'm going to dive a little bit into each. So make it easy. I heard a fun fact the other day that people make up to 220 decisions alone just on food per day. So, and then they make 35,000 decisions per day. So make your event an easy one to join. How you do that? It's really important to be clear on what is the goal of the event and why should people join. So right now, the goal of the event is to teach you how to run a virtual event, and hopefully you join to learn that. So pretty simple, right? Simple ask. And so it all has to do with the content. It doesn't matter as much when you post if what you're posting has that value. Also, creating a little bit of FOMO can be really helpful. So that fear of missing out. Provide social proof, like, oh, we already have, 50 people registered, or 10 people registered, 100 people registered, right? Shows that, like, oh, hey, maybe this is kind of interesting, other people are doing it. As far as the frequency, it's extra important because maybe if you haven't reopened yet, or you have reopened at a limited capacity, you're not gaining that same benefit you normally would of having flyers around your gym, where you can just get some passive marketing and promotion. So extra important to over communicate through the channels that you have. So to that point, Laura, let's throw up another poll. Let's kind of look at how people are promoting. Everyone, if you could please just take a moment. I'm going to read this off. So what platforms do you use to promote your events, right? Your website, Facebook, Instagram feed, Instagram stories, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok is now real popular, email newsletter, LinkedIn, snail mail even. So if you could just take a moment, and how are we looking, Laura, on responses?
We still have responses coming in. I think we need to, since we have so many responses or answer choices in this one, I think we need to just give a little bit longer on this one.
Yeah, so I want to just talk about marketing frequency. While we're waiting, a company called CoinDesk they'd shifted their 5,000 person in-person event to virtual right after COVID hit. And they used to have 5,000 attendees. They received 18,000 attendees because of their campaign strategy. And a quarter of those attendees actually signed up during the event. So I want to emphasize that. Don't ever assume that people have already heard about your event. You can still be posting like, hey, we're now live across different platforms. Okay, let's wrap up that poll.
All right, I am ending the poll now, and I will share the results.
Thank you so much, Laura. Awesome. So really interesting to see. I'm not going to read everything out, but website, definitely making sure it's on there, 80%, Facebook, 96%. That's awesome to see. Instagram feed, 85%, Instagram stories, 69%, email newsletters, a big one, 77%, maybe a little bit less on LinkedIn, snail mail. Nothing with TikTok or Snapchat yet. Again, granted, this is just from the audience here. And so really interesting to see. Thank you for sharing that, and just kind of some ways to think about how you can leverage the platforms you're already on, and leaning on micro-influencers. So make sure that you prepare your staff, your partners. Maybe you're working with a sponsor or athletes that might be joining your virtual event with what I call a promo kit. So what this includes is just a one-pager info sheet of what your event is, any graphics they can share, so prepared material and that's already ready to post, sample copy, so they can just copy and paste and create the same messaging across different platforms. And on the topic of inclusivity, start to analyze kind of where haven't you reached yet? What demographics are missing from your reach, and how can you make sure that your event is as inclusive as possible? And then lastly, with your pre-event, prep for success. So prep your presenters or your teachers, make sure they're comfortable being on camera. This is a whole new skill for a lot of people, myself included, so thanks for bearing with me here. But I just want to share my screen with what my setup looks like. So this is a little Instagram story that I did. So how many webinar best practices can you see? This is me in my room. You'll notice I'm facing a window so I get that nice natural light. I have a clean wall behind me. And what I did here is just kind of circle everything. So making sure that I have a timer, a pen to take notes, all these little elements, feel free to take them on. You know, even some branding on your water glass. This is literally where I'm standing right now. So thank you for checking that out. Feel free at Mandell Experiences to look at that in more detail. So jumping back, it's really important to make sure that everyone feels set up for success. If you go ahead and email me, Laura, if you can drop my email in the chat, Chloe@mandellexperiences.com. I am happy to follow up with you on a virtual event speaker prep sheet that I'm creating. So happy to share that with you all, and please reach out. So also really important, last but not least, with before your event, to rehearse. This is extra important because people maybe aren't as comfortable with the technology or platforms. Well, George will touch a little bit on the tech for sure, but a rehearsal includes 3 components: who's doing what, what's happening when. So for our rehearsal, even for this webinar right now, I walked through minute by minute what is going to happen when and who's doing what, and then just gaining comfort, click around, make sure that you know all aspects of the platform. So during your event, so we flipped from pre-event. So during your event, make sure that it's engaging. And so what's some ways that you can do that? We ask the question, right? Where are you guys tuning in from? Simple as that. And notice in the chat, if you are joining late, feel free to scroll up in the chat. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. And then training your virtual attendees. Laura did a great job with that. Just real simple tips on how to engage. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. But even it can be as simple as how you frame your face, right? If I'm standing all the way back here, I don't seem as present or as approachable as someone who's kind of a little bit more better in the frame. So David Meerman Scott actually said, we create the most powerful human connections within 4 feet. So that just makes me kind of think, like, how can I make myself feel 4 feet away from you? So jumping to, I talked about accessibility, making sure that you understand not everyone can hear, not everyone can see. So there are some really neat plugins and apps you can use that create closed captioning for your events. And feel free to Google those. In addition, you know, I even as a circuit instructor taught someone who was blind in one of my intro classes. And so really interesting to just never assume your audience has that ability, and maybe if there's a photo, kind of talking about what the photo is, or adding those closed captioning can help with accessibility. Lastly, during your event, kind of that level up factor is what George is going to be talking about, and making sure that, you know, thinking about kind of what has worked and maybe what are some areas of improvement. Kenji Hiratunian on the last presentation talked about that this is a very iterative process. So even one example is that I listened to myself, I'm like, shoot, my sound quality could have been better. This time I'm using different headphones because I felt that the mic made it a little bit cleaner audio. So that's just one example of ways to kind of learn from your experience each time. Everyone's really understanding in this space. So make mistakes, it's okay. Just as long as you're putting forward really great content, that's what matters. And then lastly, post-event. So we all focus, as you notice, majority of my time has been focused on planning, because that is where we spend a lot of our time. Maybe for a full day event, say with the Portland Boulder Rally, I spend 5 months planning, for example. But what if we took a little bit of extra energy and put that into our post-production? What would that look like? What would you spend your time on? So building that idea into your pre-production. So maybe you pre-write some thank you notes so that when this ends, if I had everyone's email address, right, it could immediately be like, cool, thank you. And people are like, whoa, they wrote that so quick. Well, that was done in pre-production, right? So thinking about your post during your planning can really help. Something as simple as when you hire a videographer, right? Hopefully they're capturing content to create a highlight reel, to create little clips. I know with the Hang event, for example, during Outdoor Retailer at Trex Englewood, we did a really fun piece with I think it was the symbol, right? Climb to Paris 2024, where we had the entire, I think it was like 1,000-person audience doing this amazing symbol to support the Olympic movement. So really exciting with post-production, what's possible in keeping that momentum going, promoting that the event happened after it already did. And then where does the content live? So this is important when you think about, is there a library on your website? I think the CWA has done a phenomenal job with the coronavirus webpage in housing all of these recordings from these amazing speakers. Maybe you have a YouTube page, kind of just really thinking about how that content can be repurposed is something else that I know George might touch on. Also with another way to focus your time on post-production is with reporting. It's easier than ever to calculate the ROI, the return on investment of your event. A lot of people ask me like, oh, like, why do this event? What's it for? Now more than ever, you can say, well, X number of people tuned in, X number of people clicked to your website, maybe even bought a membership because of it. You can start to see that direct correlation. So mining data, I mentioned those checkout questions during registration, can really help. So thank you so much for this time. I want to share my screen again and jump to recap, right? So before your event, focus on access, give you some tips for promotion, prep for success, rehearse, 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 so important. During your event, engage, focus on accessibility, level up in some ways George is about to present. And then after, focus on, even post-event promotion and what content can come from it. Where does that content live? What's its home? And reporting. So if you've got anything out of this, feel free to share it at Learned at CWA hashtag. And thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to George and let me read a little bit about his bio. So George Mihaly is a video producer and video educator. Since 2012, George has created live streams, commercials, documentary, and educational workshops for brands including USA Climbing, Facebook, and the NFL. George climbs on gym holds and practices handstands at the Circuit Bouldering Gym in Portland. One of his favorite places to spend time when he's not with his girlfriend or his dog. So everyone, thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to pass the mic to George.
Yay. Chloe, thank you so much. I got a lot out of your presentation. I was taking my own notes, so thank you so much. And I appreciate the nice words that you shared about me in my intro. I'd like to start my presentation off with a shared experience. So anybody and everybody who is on this webinar right now or watching the webinar after the fact, I'd like you to pick up a glass or a cup, and together on the count of 3, we will take a shared sip. So let's count it off. 1, 2, 3. Lovely. Love me a good sip of coffee in the morning. So shared experience, right? That's what we're all trying to do when we're engaging with one another in person, if we're at the gym, at the crag, at the hiking trail together, or offline, on the computer, online actually, through a live stream, through a piece of video content, through a podcast, through anything that we are engaging with together in some sort of shared fashion. And the shared sip that we just took, that's from Scott Adams. He's a comic book author and live stream presenter. He does the shared sip at the beginning of each one of his Periscope lives. And it's a little way to anchor the audience with the presenter and a way to share an experience that transcends just the screen or the camera or the microphone. And with live streaming and with video production and any sort of filmmaking efforts that I'm ever involved in with clients, I'm always thinking about that. What am I doing to create a feeling of shared experience between the people who are engaging with the content that I'm sharing either live or in a recorded fashion? Sometimes it's myself in front of the camera. I'm sometimes behind the camera. What can I do to bridge people together, to bring people closer together? So something that is a shared experience that we just had with sipping the coffee, maybe for your gym, it's everybody doing a namaste together. Maybe we're doing breathing exercises together. What are we doing together? And when we're doing things together, when are we doing them together? And what does together actually mean? Does together mean you see me and you mirror the movements that I'm doing? Or does together mean I'm listening to your instruction as I'm taking a walk to the park? And why is this connected to live streaming? What I want you to think about is really outside of the box thinking when we're thinking about live streaming. But the goal of this presentation is to give you practical tips on how to, as Chloe mentioned, level up your production. And when I say production, what I'm really talking about is the visual components. So in this live stream, it's the camera image that you have with me, the video signal that I'm sending, the audio signal, so how you sound, how you hear me, and then the third component of production, which I call found. And so all the different places that you can discover what I'm sharing, what I'm creating. And the different places that I want you to think about discovery are all the different places that your audience engages with content. So yes, it could be a video live stream on this Zoom webinar, but maybe it's going to be on a YouTube recording that's shared with the audience after the fact. Or maybe it's on a podcast platform that your audience engages with when they're doing something outside. Because let's face it, during this time of shelter in place, we're all just trying to figure out ways to spend less time in front of the screen like this and more time outside where we can be socially responsible, but enjoying what we really enjoy doing, which is breathing that good stuff, that fresh air, that CO, that oxygen that's outside coming in from the trees, and the feeling of wind, you know, from the fresh breeze coming from the ocean. These are all things that we're trying to do more of. So what can we do with our live streams to think about those different places that people can engage with our content and connect us better and connect our communities more in a way that then also supports the revenue goals that you have with your gym or with your manufacturing facility? Because at the end of the day, like, let's face it, we all have to do things that continue to sustain the offerings that we have with one another. So those three production principles we'll go over right now, and I'll give a little demos of high-end versus what you have at your disposal as far as the production principles. Tools. So the different tools of like the camera that you're using, the microphone that you're using, and let's kick it off with visual, all things visual, right? So anything with video is the production principle that I'm talking about when I think about visual with the image that you have. So how does the image that you're creating make your audience feel? Right? So right now I'm speaking with you on this nice mirrorless camera that has a great dynamic range. It has a nice representation of the colors that, you know, I have here in my environment. I already set up my environment because I knew that the natural light coming in from the window to the side is going to create a nice pleasing figure on my face. And I know this camera, I know this time of day with the light that's coming in here. I have no external lighting. I'm using just the window light, and it's just off to the side. And I'm using this expensive camera. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, hey, George, that's great. You've got this camera. This is what you do for a living. So I know you've got these tools, but what can I do with the tools that I have? And what I want you to think about is what you're experiencing and how this is making you feel, right? So I have a pretty plain background. I have a little plant right here, and this is nice because it feels like it's connecting me and maybe you to nature a little bit. And these were all intentional decisions that I had. I could shift my computer around with my camera, and then maybe I'm over here, and now this is more of like a educational presentation, right? I've got the books in the background. I love to read, so that's all well and good, but I'm a little bit darker, and so it's just a little moodier. And oh, what's that? Now I've got boxes in the background, and this is probably distracting you a little bit because you're like, oh, he's got a bunch of stuff happening behind him. What's that black thing? And so I want you to think about your background when you're creating your video content and how it's making your audience feel about you as the person who's speaking, and then also about what they're feeling when they're watching the content as far as how it impacts maybe the mood. If you're doing a yoga class, you probably want to have something like a more plain background. And you have yoga studios, but your instructors that are maybe teaching from home, how can they create something that's going on that doesn't distract from the message that they're trying to share, but is still accessible? So here I'm in my home studio office in Portland, Oregon, and I'm using my nice camera right now. But what would it look like for your yoga instructor at home? They're probably using something more like a webcam, right, on their laptop, because that's what we already have. So I'm going to switch over to the laptop webcam. And this is a live presentation, so bear with me if there's any technical hiccups. It's live, that's the way it goes, but we'll just keep going. And so now you see my laptop web camera, but what's the problem? Oh, right, I've got a camera in front of the camera, so let me move that out of the way. You don't need to be a video professional to know that that didn't work. And now you're also seeing this microphone arm, right? So this is something else to think about with the orientation that I have in my environment. What's going on with this arm? Well, this is used so I can communicate a clear voice to you, and this is a microphone that I like to have. And now we're looking at the laptop web camera, and I honestly think it looks pretty good. It's not like distracting me. It's not making me think differently about the content that I'm sharing. But of course, like, this is me speaking, so of course I wouldn't speak negatively about myself. But your instructors, maybe they're working from home, maybe they have a laptop computer and this is the camera that they're using. And so something to think about now is also like my eye line. My eye line is at the same height as the camera. So that makes it like a pretty pleasing composition. And if I was moving it around the room, you'll see again, the camera's doing an okay job. It's adjusting automatically for lighting, and I think it's honestly not too bad. This is a 2015 MacBook Pro. I mean, these things now on eBay you can get for like $500, and the webcam is honestly not too bad. If I switched over to the third tool, right, the third comparison point that a lot of you or a lot of the instructors or the different people who are engaging and creating live content for your organization are using, what is it? Right? We have my expensive camera, we have my laptop camera, but what is the camera that everybody has in their pocket? iPhone or phone with a camera, right? So now, assuming this works in a live real-time way, which it should, I will switch over to my phone camera. Boom. So now we're looking at the phone camera, but what's the problem, right? Oh, the perspective. Now the perspective is shooting up on me. It's not a really flattering look. It makes me look really giant. I've got this thing going on here, but of course you would move the camera to position it somewhere where it's more appropriate. And I'm using the front-facing camera on a iPhone XS. And honestly, I think it looks pretty good. Of course, it's like a little bit of a close perspective, so it's a harder tool to use if we were using it for a fitness class that's used like wide angle. But if you're doing something like a conversation, perhaps, maybe you got Alex Honnold to do a live Q&A with your gym for 15 minutes, he's going to be coming into you on an iPhone. And the iPhone's going to adjust for the perspective and for the platform that you're using. So maybe it looks like this, but maybe it looks like this. And so these are different things that you can do with the iPhone. And when we're thinking about price, the iPhone, it doesn't cost anything. It's what you have. I'm going to put it on a stand to make it more stable, but I'd have to find a place to position it to make it look legit. But honestly, the iPhone, the laptop web camera, and my camera, not really huge differences in the way that you're experiencing my content. But what I want you to think about is what is not changing. And that is a perfect segue to the next section, which I'll talk about briefly, and that's the audio, right? The audio hasn't changed between these three different cameras. So I'm going to switch back over to my webcam. Love doing it live. Oh my gosh, my webcam is pointing over there. It's the real deal. My office is a little busy right now. But the laptop web camera, it's funny because the laptop web camera is the camera that was used by a nonprofit organization that I was working with, that we were going to host a live fundraiser for them. And they used their laptop web cameras to do a live panel Q&A with Megan Martin, professional climber. Hold on, I'll switch the audio settings here. Okay. And that fundraiser that they hosted through their laptop web cameras, one night fundraiser, ended up raising $201,435. So the technology didn't get in the way. They used what they had, and that allowed them to engage with their audience in a way that was comfortable for them, but also successfully fundraised for their organization, right? That platform that they hosted the fundraiser on was crowdcast.io. The price was minimal because they used the technology that they had. The people, there was about 5 people running the entire fundraiser, but the content was really good and their audience was there to support them. Audio quality, right? If we're switching over to the second tier of production, and we're going to talk about sound. I know I'm running a little tight on time, so I'll just do a quick comparison. When we're talking about sound, I think actually sound is more important than visual, than the image. And that's because this is something that people will not want to stick around with your live stream for if it's not working well. This sounds really good because I'm using this microphone. This is a really popular microphone for podcasters, for musicians. It's the Shure SM7B. I think it accurately represents my voice. And if I was to switch over to something like... So now you're hearing my voice coming in through the little speaker or through the little microphone that's on my Apple AirPods. This sounds pretty good and it's wireless. So this is not a bad solution either. If you need to have a wireless microphone, use the one that you have, and maybe the one that you have is in your ear or maybe in the ear of your instructors. So thinking about the audio is important because the way that you create content can extend. So now I'll switch over to the... So now I'm again speaking on this microphone, right? This podcaster's microphone. The content that you create in a live stream, you could repurpose into a podcast format. You could repurpose the audio and have it be transcribed. These are all different ways that you can utilize high quality audio, and high quality audio starts with high quality audio capture. So having a good microphone, but then also having a place to record it. And high quality audio capture is what allowed myself, when I was recording a podcast for someone else, to then utilize the experience that I had with that client to be brought to Coach Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, 2014 NFL champs. Got to give him a shout out. We're in the Pacific Northwest, one of the top teams in the world a couple of years ago. And with Coach Pete Carroll and the podcast host, Dr. Michael Gervais, I live streamed the conversation between the two of them to the Facebook page of Coach Pete Carroll, which we then understood had a shared audience with the NFL Network and the Seattle Seahawks. So we cross-posted that live stream to those two different places, the NFL Network's page and the Seattle Seahawks page, using the audio that we were capturing for a podcast, which during the live stream had around 50,000 viewers tune in live, tens of thousands more after the fact because the recording was shared across YouTube, and then thousands and thousands more because Dr. Michael Gervais' podcast, Finding Mastery, awesome podcast, Alex Honnold's in an episode, reaches tens of thousands of people through the podcast platforms and through Dr. Michael Gervais' newsletter. So this was all possible because we had high quality audio capture that was used for the live stream that was then repurposed for podcasts. So when you're thinking about your content, anything that you're sharing on live, what can you create that your audience would want to engage with in person live? But if they missed it live, how would they engage with it after the fact? Maybe it's in a podcast, maybe it's on YouTube, maybe it's on Instagram Live, maybe it's on LinkedIn feed, maybe it's on Twitter feed. All these different places are places where your community engages and where you have opportunities to connect and share experiences with your community. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me ramble about the three different production practices and as many quick tips as I could share around not really being too concerned about your web camera that you're using, but maybe more understanding the light, but then understanding that your audio capture is really important, right? You could use a wireless microphone setup, maybe an Audio-Technica 2100. Maybe this will work. Maybe your AirPod Pros. But try to capture audio in a great way, in a clean way, that is able to be then repurposed in different platforms and in different mediums than where you originally live streamed. So if you want to connect with me further, I'm going to hang out here in the Q&A. We're also going to, I believe, host a little special additional Q&A after this presentation. But all of my work can be seen on storyfirm.com, STORYFIRM.com. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, at George Mihaly. And again, a lot of my work used to be in production, so commercials, documentaries, and now it's really shifted more towards live stream education and consulting and facilitating live stream productions. So if you have any questions about that stuff, I'm always happy to chat, and I'm always happy to even hop on the phone too. So if you want to give me a call, you can do that as well. My number's on the website, storyfirm.com. So again, I thank you so much for your time and attention. And if anybody's experiencing the ill effects of this current pandemic, I'm sending well wishes and lots of love to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. That was amazing. Oh my God. I loved kind of the real-time switch between cameras, audio. And it's super helpful to understand that, like, really no matter where you're coming from, there's a couple things you can do, especially with the audio. I thought that was so interesting of how, you know, even though you switch between different cameras, when the audio stayed really clear, it kind of didn't matter as much around the look, even though that's still important too. But just focus on what's within your capability. One thing I thought, Stephen, who chatted, that there was a slight delay in the audio when you're on your iPhone. That was kind of just interesting to notice and point out. Who knows if it's a thing with Zoom. George, did you have a little, can you comment at least on that?
Yeah, because I'm taking a look at the chat here. Audio video delay in this instance could be caused by the processing that's needing to happen inside Zoom, switching between the different signals. So the way that I was switching for Zoom, when I would switch cameras, the computer would have to re-up its understanding of where the audio signal was coming from and where the video signal was coming from. So great to know, something that I'll troubleshoot later. And best practices, honestly, for live streaming are always evolving. I started live streaming in 2012. The first platform that I ever streamed on was Google Hangouts. Rest in peace, Google Hangouts. Or no, Google Plus Hangouts, I should say, because that social media platform is no longer in existence. But the technology evolves, the platforms change, but the principles of practicing and rehearsing and figuring out ways to do it better next time are always there. So I'll have to try that again and see what caused the delay.
Thank you, George. Yeah, super interesting to bring that kind of technical understanding to what we're doing, even right here, right now. So definitely, if you have any questions for us, either for me as a producer. So George and I have even worked together in this capacity. George hired me on to help in a production capacity for that Pete Carroll interview, right? So what does a producer do? I do everything that George is not doing. So making sure that people are showing up on time, making sure that all the supplies are where they need to be, that everyone knows what's going on and that it was planned appropriately so that hopefully during the event it's a little bit more calm. But I want to address a couple questions that are coming in. So Keegan asks regarding quality audio capture to share as recording after. I have an issue with bad echo in the yoga studio where we're streaming classes. We're okay live, but recording are not high quality. Suggestions for improving quality, reducing echo. George, if you can help us with that one.
Totally. So you don't need a microphone to understand the environment, the audio environment of the space that you're in. You could literally just come into the space, stand in the middle of the room, snap your fingers, and listen to if there's an echo already happening, right? Maybe you do a hand clap and then you understand like, okay, we've got a bit of an echo. So what does that mean? That means that your sound is bouncing off of hard surfaces. So walls, ceilings if they're hard, floors if they're not carpeted, which probably yoga studio is not. And so if you're having a lot of echo, that means that the sound before it's being captured into the microphone is being bounced off of those hard surfaces. So right now I'm in a carpeted room, so I don't really have much echo. I have a window to the right of me, so I would maybe get a little bit of echo off the glass. But if you're wanting to reduce the echo inside your yoga room, you'd want to increase the proximity, or make the proximity of the microphone closer to the speaker's mouth, to the yoga teacher's mouth. If they're speaking from their laptop webcam, something really simple, like a really basic, cheap DIY trick, you could put a sock, a thin sock, like the sock that you put on your foot, over the area of the computer where the microphone is, and that will create a little bit of a barrier between the microphone and then the speaker's voice. You have to make sure, of course, it's not reducing the volume to a point where you can't hear. But like this microphone right here that I have, this is the wireless microphone, has a little bit of a furry cover. And so this little furry cover would help to reduce echo, would help to capture just like a cleaner sound. It's used where, you're in a windy environment, but it could also help to reduce echo. If you really wanted to sound treat the room, you would put carpeting underneath the speaker. So that way, at least where their microphone is positioned or where the computer that is used to capture their sound is positioned, at least that is near a material that is going to absorb the sound more. If you really were sound treating it more, you would put blankets up on the walls as well.
I'm going to chime in too. It looks like Alistair commented exactly that in response to Keegan's question. Hanging some blankets around helps stop the sound bouncing around the room, especially for yoga studios with nice clean walls and spaces. So thank you, Alistair, for contributing that. George, the interesting thing around about that sock, I never thought about it. Can you help us understand on a computer, usually where is the audio going into?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, I can ask it better. So where is the computer picking up the audio? Can you help us understand, like, say
Yeah, so on a MacBook Pro, let me just grab that. So this is the 2015 MacBook Pro. On these computers, the microphone is positioned on the, let me just make sure it's in frame.
There you go.
It's gonna be on the speaker, like right around here. It varies depending on the laptop, but usually it's underneath the left speaker array. That's 2015 MacBook Pro, but it really kind of depends on because it could be a PC laptop that somebody is using, and it could also be the microphone that's being used to capture the sound that's coming from the webcam, if there's a webcam attached to it. So it depends on the computer. So you'll want to look that up for the specific models that you have. Yeah.
Thank you, George.
But
Yeah,
MacBook Pro is underneath the speaker.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Like, I mean, these all could be their own webinars entirely, but we really appreciate kind of everyone's interest. We've had almost 100% retention throughout this entire webinar. So really exciting that people are finding this interesting. I want to keep on with the Q&A. We still have plenty of time. So please, we want to address your questions and answers either from a planning, promotional marketing, post-production, or just during the event perspective. Kate asked, do you consider / is there a function for closed captioning for those who may be hearing impaired? Or
Yes.
would it be likely that those folks who would have that set up for themselves on their device and maybe the producer themselves shouldn't worry about it? George, you want to chime in on there?
Yeah, I'm going to chime in real time and actually try to demonstrate the effectiveness of this one tool. So there's a great website called webcaptioner.com. So Facebook Live for high quality audio capture is doing now auto captioning on certain Facebook Lives. So for anybody who's hearing impaired, their live streams on Facebook Live sometimes can be auto captioned. But if you go to webcaptioner.com, let me just type it in here. Webcaptioner.com is a free website to use that will use the microphone source that's connected to WebCaptioner to caption live in real time. And here it's capturing my voice speaking. I'm going to focus. All right. So let me see if I could do this. So webcaptioner.com, live in real time, is transcribing my voice. And what you could do is, it requires a little bit of a technical setup, but you could use this software, crop it, and overlay it in your video to create a live, free, real-time captioning. And I think it's fantastic because captions are really, really useful for not only accessibility purposes, but then also search purposes. If you have your presentation captioned and you have the text from the presentation available in the area where you're hosting the presentation, it will help like all the different algorithms for search. If you upload your presentation to YouTube, it usually takes a few hours, but YouTube will also create a auto transcription, so a free automatic transcription of your presentation, and then you can download those transcribed files and create essentially like a downloadable, searchable document for any of the words that are used or spoken that are transcribed correctly in your presentation. So webcaptioner.com is free and it's live in real time. And YouTube, if you upload the video, it could even be unlisted, will also do automatic transcribing of your content. And the accuracy on YouTube is about 90%. So it's actually really good. Yeah.
Thank you, George. That's so interesting. I threw the link, everyone, in the chat, so you can copy and paste that. And I'm not seeing any others in the Q&A. Laura Garnett, did you have any questions for us? Feel free to chime in. I know Garnett's kind of behind the scenes even, but Laura, if you have any questions for us, feel free to ask on behalf of the audience.
Yeah, sure. We actually did have one other question from Keegan about microphones and any specific recommendations for good microphones to use for the teacher when live streaming or recording yoga classes.
Yes. So live streaming a yoga class, you're probably going to want to use a wireless microphone on the teacher for the reasons that the distance away from the microphone is going to impact the quality and also the volume that's picked up. So right now I have this microphone, it's just a few inches from my mouth, and that works. But if I was to stand in the back of the room, it's a lot harder to hear. And it sounds like I'm yelling because I have to yell so you can hear me. But if I get close, it's going to work. So a wireless microphone, this one is made by a company called Rode, R-O-D-E. And this pack is great. There's a version that they make called the Rode Wireless Go. And that retails at about $200. And it's fantastic because it's a little clip that you can just put onto your collar or your tank top. And the other clip could connect either to a phone, so if you're live streaming from a phone, or a computer. And that gives you wireless transmission, and the quality is really good. It doesn't really have a lot of interference from other wireless signals. And that's definitely the one that I would recommend. About $200, Rode Wireless Go on Amazon and B&H. It could take a little while to deliver right now, but if you dig around the web enough, you'll find it.
Thank you, George. That's such a wealth of knowledge. Looks like we got another question in the chat. How many channels do you like to promote through? Is there ideal number or array? So this is a great question. We did a poll earlier, in case you weren't here, around what channels everyone in the audience uses. So really heavily focused on social media. I would highly recommend leveraging, kind of understanding both where your audience is, as well as where your audience is that you're not currently reaching. So George mentioned, for example, that he was able to cross promote content with partners. I didn't even get into the topic of sponsorship, but leaning on not only your platforms. So I would highly recommend, depending on the type of event, promoting it across as many channels as possible. Never assume that anyone has seen anything, right? That's kind of my go-to, especially with virtual events. We're inundated with all types of events and content coming at us. So definitely make sure that when you're posting, that there is some campaign built around it. You're not just posting the same thing again and again. Something that I do, for example, with the Portland Boulder Rally is, I'll say like, hey, so it's usually the first Saturday of October. So maybe, September 1st, I'll be like, okay, on September 18th, we're going to announce the pro list, right? So what pro athletes are coming. I'm getting some excitement. you might say like you have a guest speaker, right? So on this date, we're going to announce even who the guest speaker is. You're starting to create some excitement around just even pre-event. And then on that date, you might announce who it is. But after that, have content already prepared so that you kind of keep that consistent messaging, and you keep, you know, I've studied a lot like the essence of hype, right? How do you create hype? You create anticipation. You want to share bits and pieces about your event on as many platforms that you kind of have to your disposal. And then creating those promotional kits, as I mentioned, giving the assets, say it's a graphic for social media, or maybe some copy that any one of your partners or your staff, if that's appropriate, or maybe you have some even local businesses that you work with often, say it's a brewery, or say it's even just your neighbor right next to you, that they can promote that thing's going on, right? We hopefully all want each other to succeed. So key points are, you know, try as many places that you'll start to see what resonates. But we saw on the poll, a lot of people rely on Facebook, Instagram, and newsletters, and just experiment, and also set your kind of micro-influencers up for success to be your advocates. Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so we're about at time, but because if you have more questions, so this is something that we're trying out. George and I have created a post-event hangout. So there's so much kind of great energy, great questions, you know, even networking, we started to see where people are, that we're after, Laura's gonna give a little quick summary and outro presentation, but I'm gonna drop a link to join myself and George in another Zoom meeting. That's where we can actually all see one another. So if you have the time, we understand you've already spent a lot of time here, but if you have the time, please join us and feel free to ask more questions, kind of pick our brains, because we're here as a resource for you. I'm also going to share again, please stay in touch. Best way to reach me is by email. George mentioned the ways that you can reach him. And thank you again so much for your time. Laura, if you can take us out.
Sure. Thanks so much, Chloe and George, for all of these awesome tips and tricks and things for us to think about when we are putting together our virtual content for our communities. So even the CWA has learned a lot from you guys already, and picked up some new things that we're doing. So thank you so much. I wanted to make sure everyone knows about our special community call that we're having this Thursday, June 25th at the same time as always, 10 a.m. Mountain. We're going to have two guest speakers from Camber Outdoors with us, Emily Newman and Renita Smith. A lot of us right now are, you know, struggling with the current racial justice movement and the protests, and just really wondering, like, what can we do? So Camber is a nonprofit organization in the outdoors industry. They have a lot of amazing resources, so you can check out their website. But Emily and Renita are going to be with us on Thursday to talk about, you know, what can climbing gyms do to provide more equitable and inclusive workspaces for their employees. They're going to be going over they're going to be having an overview of their anti-racism action agenda, and just highlighting some of the most promising corporate practices that they're seeing in the field of workplace inclusion, equity, and diversity. So we're really excited and grateful to have Emily and Renita who will be with us on Thursday. So please do join us for that. And in the meantime, as always, Garnet, Alexandra, and myself, the CWA team, are here for you. Our contact info is there. Always feel free to reach out to us if you have questions, concerns, anything that you're dealing with through this current situation that we're in society. We are totally here for you.
That's awesome. It's so great to see what the CWA is doing for its members and the community. Right now, I just want to exemplify, show through example, a neat element that I actually witnessed attending another webinar where there's a built-in packing period. Remember that from school, right? Just it's always nice to take a breath, to take a beat right after a presentation. Maybe there's some conversations going on in the chat. Maybe people are answering each other's Q&As. There's a link that I've put in the chat that is to the next Zoom meeting. If you want to keep picking my brain and learn from George, please feel free. Also tag hashtag #LearnedAtCWA if you feel like tweeting something or kind of supporting your community with what you've learned today. We really appreciate it. But always nice to kind of just like take a breath, let people sort of like pack up, digest what they just heard. And really great branding opportunity, as you can see. And this is a nice way to say end an educational presentation or even end any event. And so we are going to give you 30 seconds, end this call. And then again, if you want to join us, there's the link in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. This was really fun.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, George. Thanks, everyone.